Hello and welcome back to the Daily Express's Royal Roundup. I'm, of course, joined by Richard. Hello, Richard. Welcome.
Hello.
Lots to talk about today. The Royals are in Cornwall. You've got some news on that. And of course, we'll be talking about the coronation, the big royal story of this year. Will Harry and Meghan turn up? Do you want them to turn up? Let us know in the comments. And of course, there is a new Netflix film coming out depicting the organisation of the infamous interview on Newsnight with Prince Andrew. Richard, lots to talk about then, but let's kick off with Cornwall. What's been happening today in Cornwall?
So the Duke and Duchess of Cornwall have been on their first visit to the county since they inherited the titles on the accession of the King. So that's William and Kate. We don't get too hung up on what we call people in the media. I get constantly asked about, is it Catherine or Kate or whatever. A lot of ardent royalists don't like us calling her Kate, but she will always be Kate to most of the British public, I think. Duke and Duchess of Cornwall are titles that you should only really, they're subsidiary titles you should only really use when they're in the duchy, and there they are today. They're in Falmouth. They've been to the National Maritime Museum, Cornwall, in Falmouth. Been doing some fun things in there, but there's just in the last few moments, really, we've heard that there was a protester led away. And I have to say, I haven't yet posted the video, but she's come from a colleague. But it looks like a bit of an overreaction from the police again. And we saw this after the Queen's death in various places around the country where anti-monarchy protesters put up blank sheets of paper protesting about the right to freedom of speech. And that's what this young guy seems to have been doing, just holding up a blank sheet of paper, which is basically saying, I ought to have the right to protest. And the police have detained him. They've led him away. I don't think he's been arrested. But it looks really heavy-handed for somebody who didn't, as far as I could tell, wasn't shouting out anything.
No. And in terms of royal reaction to this before, we saw the egg incident, didn't we? And that didn't really seem to faze the royal family before. Do you think that they're very much used to anti-monarchists coming out, and do they have any kind of firm action plan when these issues do arise?
Well, generally, they just try to carry on. I mean, I have to say, I think the Republican movement in this country, and that's a movement that I, as a reporter, do engage with, because although I personally am not a Republican, and my paper doesn't really support republicanism, unlike, say, The Guardian, I feel that we need to tell that side of the story, that there are roughly about 20% of the British public that wants to replace the monarchy. So, but it's been very much in the background as far as I've been concerned for the past few years. Republic, the anti-monarchy group, has mounted demonstrations at Jubilees and a few other big events. But generally, I think, they might not agree with me saying this, but my take on it would be that while Queen Elizabeth II was alive, they didn't think that they thought she had so much personal capital that there wasn't a lot to be gained by attacking her personally. And with the change in reign, I think they see an opportunity. So both online and physically, at royal visits, I think we are seeing more anti-monarchy protesters turning out.
And what do you think this will upset the royal family, or as you said, they're just carrying on? But actually, behind the scenes, will this be upsetting any of them?
Well, it has been quite interesting that an awful lot of engagements have been embargoed until arrival, sometimes departure. And we got used to this a little bit over the pandemic, because the palace, when members of the royal family were allowed out to meet people, they still didn't want to encourage crowds together. But it seems to have persisted much more than it ever did before. I think particularly if they're in a busy city centre, they don't like announcing too far in advance that they're going to be there. I was in Leeds last week, and Kate was going to the city's Kirkgate Market, indoor market, and they announced that I think it was about half an hour, 45 minutes before she actually arrived. But it meant that a lot of the shoppers weren't aware. And in fact, there was I thought, a lovely quote from one lady who'd just got off the bus from Harrogate and just said, "Oh, I didn't know you were coming, love. So
good accent there, Richard.
Yeah. So we've seen a lot more unannounced visits. We knew that we were able to say that they were going to Falmouth today, but not the locations of their visits, if I remember rightly, until they'd actually arrived. So it is interesting, and I think the risk of protesters, demonstrators, is an added factor now for the police and for the organisers.
And do you think that the protesting has got worse since Harry and Meghan stepped down at all? Because obviously we've seen massive support for them online. We see massive support for them on the Royal Roundup every single week. And we also get the other side of the fence who think quite differently. But do you think that, perhaps they've taken that into account, that there are some people who think the royal family might be wrong?
Well, I don't see much evidence of those people turning out to protest, I have to say. I mean, I think they're just it's a more orchestrated attempt online to derail the activities of the working royals from that quarter. But yeah, interesting. I mean, because a lot of those people don't actually live in the UK. A lot of those, although there is still some support for Meghan in this country, it's dwindled, and it's mainly abroad, I think.
And I saw quite a sweet moment actually on Twitter between Kate and somebody last week. He said, "Oh, I've been really, really nervous to meet you." She said, "Don't worry, we all get nervous." So it was quite sweet how she had that moment. And still, despite the fact that she's been a working royal for however many years now, and she's one of favourite royals when it comes down to polls, she still said that she's quite nervous. So that was a sweet moment. Okay, then. Well, we're going to move on now onto the coronation, which everyone has started to talk about. We've been speaking about it for a couple of weeks now on the Royal Roundup. And with every week that goes by, the question just gets bigger, Richard. Will Harry and Meghan be coming back? The swirling rumours start. What details can we expect from the weekend? So I guess the first question is to you, Richard. Do you know if any talks have happened? Because that's what Harry wanted.
I don't believe any have at the moment. No, it's something I've been checking actually, and I thought you were going to mention actually. If you recall, last week we talked about the possibility of Harry and Meghan just coming in briefly.
Yes.
And lo and behold, one of the Sunday papers came up with a story saying exactly the same thing. I'm not sure. I mean, it seems an obvious thing, but I'm not sure whether.
Yeah, I think they framed it on Harry in a hurry.
Yes, 48-hour visit. That, as I said last week, that makes sense to me. I'm going to be surprised if they don't get an invitation. Ultimately, it does. It's down to the government actually. So it's Rishi Sunak and his fellow ministers who are going to have to explain, I think, who's been invited, who hasn't been invited, and why. Well, it's very difficult. If you look at, the nearest example is Edward and Mrs. Simpson. And of course, they didn't go to George VI's coronation in 1937 or to Queen Elizabeth II's coronation in 1953. But there is nothing coming out of the palace on this. I
No.
can honestly say, if you read a report saying royal sources are saying this and that, it is just speculation from people who don't really have any sort of track. And the people who, I have been speaking to people who are on the inside, and I don't think they have really got a clear idea yet. It must be imminent though, because I think the invitations will be going out really soon. So
Yes.
they are going to have to bite the bullet and make a decision pretty soon.
And I'm guessing if they did come, they'd most likely leave their children at home.
Again, that would be my guess. A quick trip over, attend the coronation. Probably not go out on the balcony. Not attend.
And of course,
attend the other events that are on the Sunday and the Monday.
And of course, they'd have to think about security costs in this, won't they? Because there's that whole topic debate which happened last time over security costs and who covers that for when they are here.
Yes, I mean, I think under the existing arrangements, the police could probably provide security for them if they're coming to the coronation on the grounds that they are part of a national event, which is going to require high levels of security. So I think under the existing arrangements, which are essentially, it's on a case-by-case basis, my guess is they would get security for that. But if they came for an extended visit and started going out visiting charities or going out to see friends or whatever, then the police might well argue, well, that's not really covered by
no. Which is understandable. But the security costs for the coronation in general will run up into the thousands and thousands of pounds, Richard.
Oh yes, millions. I would imagine, or certainly hundreds of thousands. And it's a really interesting question. How much is the coronation going to cost the taxpayer?
Yeah.
Because ultimately, it's down to the government to pay for it. And I'm sure I'm not the only reporter who's finding it extremely difficult and frustrating trying to get information out of the various organisers. There'll be a steady stream of things coming out. What tends to happen at these big royal events, big state events, is that the organisers have a grid of when they're going to announce things, and they don't like being bounced into announcing things before they're ready to. But equally, of course, we're paid to find news stories, to break stories, rather than just sit here being spoon-fed information by them. And I know personally, I'm finding it very frustrating that the palace is very, very reluctant to comment or guide on anything to do with the coronation. Surely,
that is a public interest question, saying how much is this going to cost?
Yes, it is. You get the impression that they've got no idea, that there's no budget, no real sense of how much we'll just do it as we see fit and then see how much it costs afterwards. Now, the fact is, nearly all of these royal events showcase Britain at its best. I think most people would say, most British taxpayers would say. The Queen's state funeral, for example, and the journey down of her cortege from Scotland. So many people praised the BBC's coverage of that, and indeed the press's coverage of it, I think, and also the way that the palace and the government organised those things. So I don't think it's going to be that. Of course, there will be people, particularly Republicans, who will be complaining about the cost of it. But actually, in the great scheme of things, it's going to be a tiny amount of money compared, for example, to £15 billion wasted on PPE equipment that can never be used.
I mean, that's a whole nother debate, isn't it, Richard? But I mean, quite. I mean,
but it would just be nice to see a bit of transparency, and I think it's understandable that you can't be sure of how much these things are going to cost, but you get an estimate. But I suppose they don't want to give an estimate and then find that it costs double what they estimated, which I think has happened in a few previous coronations.
It's difficult. But this coronation will, of course, have pomp and pageantry attached to it. I can imagine. How much, though, when it comes down to details, will be coming straight from King Charles? Will he want to be across every single detail, or will he be very much, divvying out the tasks for the coronation?
Well, I think he'll want to be across it all, but there's a coronation committee organising it, and he won't be. I don't think he'll be hands-on everything, but things will have to be run past him. So it's and I also detecting a little bit of frustration from people on the periphery. MPs, for example, MPs are getting quite jumpy about are they going to get an invitation to the coronation, and the authorities in Parliament don't sound particularly happy, that the palace has been so tight-lipped about arrangements, and so it's all getting a little bit fraught behind the scenes. But we will be hearing more very, very soon about the coronation.
Can you give us a date, Richard?
No, I don't want to say any more than that. But I think, there will be announcements being made.
Fine. All right, then. So we will hold off on the announcement, and then we'll talk about it next week as well. Okay. Well, we took this to a poll, so let's get up the poll. Would you like to see Harry and Meghan back for the coronation? This is the Daily Express audience. No, 90%. Pretty damning results, actually, on our Royal Roundup poll. I didn't actually expect it to be that bad, but are you surprised, Richard?
No, I'm not really. I mean, opinion polls have shown more than that wanting to see them there, and opinion polls are the ones that are representative. That they do differ as well, but I'm sure the majority of people who read the Daily Express and who read the Express website do not want to see Harry back, and I'm also sure that the majority of the British public don't want to see them come back. But I think they will. I think they will. Like I say, it's just a guess, really. But my feeling is that they will be invited. Whether they come is another matter.
Do you think the royal family in general will be worried about being, the whole weekend will be overshadowed by Harry and Meghan's, arrival if they did come? Or do you think they've done the Netflix now, they've done Oprah, they've done a book, all the rest of it, that they're not actually now that bothered?
I think it'll be a story. I think we're repeating ourselves. I think we said this last week. It'll be a story whether they come or they don't come.
Yeah,
I think the example from the Jubilee, Platinum Jubilee, is likely to be followed, where there'll be a mixture of booing and cheering for them if they turn up at the Abbey, and if they just turn up at the Abbey and aren't present at the other events, then that's it, really. That's the story. There'll be one more story saying they haven't been seen at anything else and they've gone back.
Okay.
Will no doubt become clear fairly soon.
It will. And it's February already. Time is flying.
It's so awkward for them, though. I mean, every engagement I cover now, I'm listening out for conversations that are taking place. Like the one in Leeds I was at last week, people were. There were a couple of people talking to Princess of Wales about how important their extended families were in helping to bring up their children.
Yeah.
And she was chatting away about it and how agreeing how important it was. But of course, there she is, not involved at all in Archie and Lilibet's.
The elephant in the room.
It is definitely just about every engagement they undertake at the moment. you feel like, or I feel anyway, that I have to make some reference to it because it is there in the background all the time.
Yeah, and as much as they'd like it not to be, you're right. It is still there, and we all know about it so publicly, whether they like that or not. Okay, we're going to move on now into another member of the royal family, Prince Andrew, who we've spoken about a lot, haven't we, Richard? Well, there's now going to be a Netflix film made about women who came together to essentially want to do this interview with Prince Andrew on Newsnight, which is infamous and still spoken about to this day. And some would say, very much did damage his reputation, which, we've spoken about this before, Richard, which I'm sure he would hope he could somehow get back if he could. But unfortunately, a lot of people think the damage is already done. So give us more info on this. I've seen Gillian Anderson has said that she will be within this Netflix movie. It's called Scoop.
Yes.
Richard, what more do we know about
it? So it's based on Sam McAllister's memoir of the process that led to her securing the interview with Emily Maitlis for BBC Newsnight. Rufus Sewell will play Prince Andrew, which I think Prince Andrew will probably be quite pleased about.
Yes, there's quite a few people have said online how he's incredibly handsome.
I think I understand he's going to be using prosthetics to.
Maybe that would make the difference.
You've got Keely Hawes, Billy Piper.
It's a stellar cast.
Yes, it's a scandal that won't go away for the royal family, isn't it? And it, I'm sure it won't be welcomed by the palace at all. And of course, I couldn't resist just pointing out what Prince Harry had said about the media trying to take ownership of, his family's story and turning it into a soap opera. And here we have Netflix, which has paid Harry and Meghan for their services. He's still paying them, as far as I understand, doing exactly the same thing.
Except this time, Prince Andrew, I assume, won't be getting a cut.
No, he won't. No. And what can you say about Prince Andrew? I just take with a pinch of salt. Question that he's going to try to make a comeback, because I just can't see any way that he can. I think he's just finished.
No, it seems when things quieten down on that front.
Yes.
And another story is just round the corner. It does seem. And now there's obviously this Netflix film made about him. Richard, if you could guess, do you think he'll watch it, or do you think he won't? Speculate. I just want to guess. Yes.
I always think not, but I've sort of been led to believe in the past that, for example, the Queen didn't watch The Crown, and then other people have suggested that she did. So who knows? I think Harry has said that he's watched a few episodes of The Crown, and I think Queen Camilla might have watched.
Yes, I heard that too. Okay.
I wouldn't think he'd want to be reminded of it. And as a reporter, I always and as somebody who I sort of believe in being honest and open about things, and I just think I'm naturally somebody who would say, do the interview, just get it all out, and say you've never met this woman or whatever.
Yeah.
But clearly, had I been advising him and said that, I would now be out of a job, because the woman who did do that was out of a job, and it was a terrible, terrible mistake, because it was his attitude, I suppose, more than anything, that just cemented it.
Yeah, I'm sure. Actually, when you put it like that, Richard, maybe he won't be watching. But there you go. That'll be another watch this coming. Do you know when it's coming out? Is it coming out this year?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
No, I don't think the date's been released. Well, Netflix just keeps on popping up for the royal family. Let's have a look at the poll then. Let's see what you guys thought about this. Do you think Prince Andrew's reputation will be affected by the new Netflix film on how the infamous Newsnight interview was secured? No, 52%. Yes, 47%. So, Richard, do you think that the damage is already done?
I think so. Yeah. So I suppose I'd probably agree with those who voted no, in the sense that, as you say, the damage is done. I don't think his reputation can be damaged much further than it already is.
No. And do you think the king will be aware of all of these things which are happening?
Yes, yeah. It is interesting though. When I was at Sandringham on Christmas Day, forgive me if I mentioned this, I don't think I have. We asked a few people in the crowd who'd spoken to him. Do you think do you think it's right that he's here? And not a single person had anything negative to say about him at all.
Oh, really?
I've known him for years. I've been coming here for years. Those ardent royalist fans, particularly older ones, I've known him since he was a young man. Always a really nice young man, and it surprised me, I have to say. And going back to Coronation, I'm pretty sure that Andrew will be there as well.
Do you think he'll be forefront and centre?
Well, my guess is that we'll see the similar pattern to the seating pattern we saw at the Jubilee service at St Paul's Cathedral, where the working members of the royal family are given precedence and are in the front row, and then the ones who don't represent the monarch are second or third row behind.
So, and I assume he won't be sitting next to Harry and Meghan. For anybody who's doing the seating plan, I'm going to guess that's a no.
Probably not.
Maybe he'll be sitting next to Fergie. Maybe. Okay then. Let's go on now onto the news this week of the new look of the stamps, which is very weird, isn't it, Richard? After seeing the late Queen on stamps for a very long time. Well, now we've got this. I actually think it's quite a good depiction of him. Actually, yes. It made him look 20 years younger. It's obviously, you can obviously see his age there. He's not gone over it with a bit of an airbrush. What do you think, Richard, about this?
Well, yeah, it's good. I mean, what interested me was that there's no crown there anywhere.
No, there's not.
And, it's the first, as far as I checked this with the Royal Mail Museum, and they concurred. As far as we know, it's the first definitive stamp, at least, the everyday use stamp that doesn't feature a crown anywhere in the design. King Charles is the seventh British monarch to feature on the stamp. The first one was Queen Victoria, who appeared on the penny black, the world's first adhesive postage stamp, and she appeared in a diamond diadem that was made for George IV's coronation, and Queen Elizabeth used the same diadem for her picture for the stamp. And in between, the male monarchs, if you look at the design, they're not actually wearing a crown, but there's a sort of crown woven into the design at the top of the stamp, the side of the stamp, I think in Edward VIII's case. So, so I just thought that was quite interesting. And and
he obviously would have had a say on that. It goes without saying that he would have given the green light having a crown on or not.
Yeah, he was. He was very closely involved in discussing it with them. The chap who was speaking on behalf of the Royal Mail said two things, really, two slightly contradictory things, in the sense that the king had been very keen to emphasise continuity, so wanted to make the design as similar as possible to his mother's. But then at the same time, he drew attention to the lack of crown and the simplicity of it all, and said, he thought that was really telling, and that was the sort of symbol of the sign of his approach to the monarchy, really. Just getting on with it, getting down to business, not worrying too much about all the paraphernalia.
less elaborate, less
Yes,
lavish,
yes,
which I'm sure is appreciated in tough times at
yeah.
the moment. Without putting on a stamp, which has a big expensive crown on,
Yeah.
I can imagine. Okay,
Well, all of those designs have had. Don't ask me why, but the monarch is always looking leftwards as you look at the stamp.
oh
In those designs. Whereas I think the coins, they change them every. I think I'm right in saying each changing monarch they change the direction.
why?
I'm
Why,
not.
Richard?
I'm not. I'm sorry. I should have researched
No,
that. But
I mean I just find that utterly bizarre. What
mm,
an odd tradition.
yes, yeah.
Bizarre, strange. Well, there we go. Okay.
Well, the other thing to say about the stamps is, being an environmentalist, he's decreed that he doesn't want to see any of the old stamps pulped. So he doesn't want post offices issuing them, excuse me, until supplies have run out of the old ones with it featuring his
Well,
mark.
that's good. That's something, isn't it?
So I think we're likely to see them in April. I think around about April the 4th is when they're due to.
And will we get special coronation ones, do you think? You know, I know there are certain at Christmas you get special stamps.
Good question. Yes, I reckon you're right. I expect we'll get coronation stamps. Yes.
That will be nice. Okay then, Richard, lots going on this year. Coming from the expert, what can we predict then from the royal family in 2023, other than the blindingly obvious, the coronation, and of course Kate following on with her early years project. Obviously, we're going to see, you know, the Wales is very much on taking more of the climate work, etc., from the king. But what else can we expect that, you know, royal fans perhaps don't quite know about yet, and that you can reveal?
Well, I think it's already been reported that in France that they're expecting the King and Queen Consort to come on a state visit towards the end of March, around about the week of March 27th. Palace has refused so far to confirm or deny that, but I think we're expecting to see them in France and probably another European country around about that time. And I'll be astonished if there aren't royal visits to Australia and New Zealand and Canada, particularly, but other realms as well. The other overseas realms, 14 overseas realms where he's king. A lot of those, I would think, should expect to get a royal visit at some point in the next couple of years at least. And of course, that will be interesting, particularly in the Caribbean, where there's been a bit of a backlash. I noticed, though, in Jamaica, the government's efforts there to become a republic seem to have taken a little bit of a backward step. I think the opposition party and the governing party aren't in agreement about some of the steps that needed to be taken for that. So I think we'll see, if not the King and Queen, then Prince and Princess of Wales or other members of the royal family in all of those countries that I've mentioned.
And it goes without saying, obviously, the King and Queen are getting older, but that hasn't stopped them so far. They've very much, you know, been on the move, haven't they? But that's not going to stop them, is it, from doing these big trips abroad?
Well, I wouldn't have thought so at this stage. I mean, it is interesting. I think, once the Queen, the late Queen, got to around about 80, she stopped doing long haul travel. Prince Philip carried on for a little while, and I guess it just depends on each individual.
And he'll be very keen to keep these relationships very much fresh and very much and positive, obviously, for the future.
Yes, yeah. And the other thing to say, of course, about these Commonwealth visits is that they rely on the governments of those countries actually wanting to facilitate the visit. And Australia clearly has got a Prime Minister who wants his country to become a republic. Not in this term of office, by the sounds of it. He thinks it's not an urgent priority. But we saw last week that the Australian central bank has decided not to put a new king on its $5 banknotes. So that means, and instead they're going to put an indigenous design. So the Queen is currently on those banknotes, but not on any others, as I understand it. So we're seeing the early steps towards a transition to a republic in Australia, and unless Mr. Albanese loses the next election, if he wins a second term, then it's likely there'll be a referendum in Australia. In the meantime, the question is, will he want to facilitate a royal visit to his country?
Yeah.
New Zealand has been a changeover of prime minister, hasn't there? But I would imagine that New Zealand hasn't had I think it's 23 years since the reigning monarch last went to New Zealand. So the king.
A long time. A long time. Okay then, Richard. Lots to go over there, as usual. But thank you for all of your knowledge, as per usual. A big year ahead, and as you said, there is more to come in terms of coronation news. So just keep an eye on it. Basically, keep an eye on Richard's Twitter and the Daily Express's Twitter and socials, where you can catch up on that. And of course, we have the Raw Roundup, which is more than likely every Thursday now, and you can also watch us on YouTube every Friday, where it premieres on there too. So, Richard, thank you. Thank you. And we'll be hearing more from Cornwall, and you can check that out, as I said, on Raw Reporter's Twitter and Daily Express's socials too. We have all of our playlists on there, so you can catch up on that. Richard, I will see you next week, and thank you very much for tuning in, everybody. Catch you then.
Bye.
Bye.